Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie, and in this video I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, October the 6th, 2025. It's going to be a pretty short video. I'm going to start off with a preview of the main astrological events of the week, and then I'm going to move on to the I Ching and do an I Ching reading for the week, which will have 4 sections. I'll look at things from a general perspective, then money, then career and business, and finally relationships. So let's start off with the astrology. So here is the chart of the week. I start at midnight on Monday the 6th at New York, of course. Don't forget to like and subscribe, if appropriate. So, at the beginning of the week, you can see that Mercury is at 29 degrees and 12 minutes Libra. So Mercury is getting ready to move into Scorpio, and that's arguably the first sort of main thing that happens this week is Mercury changing signs, and that is a reminder that the Scorpio season is almost upon us. We haven't got so long to go. We've already got Mars in Scorpio, and now we've got Mercury in Scorpio, and in a couple of weeks' time the Sun will be in Scorpio. Now, when Mercury moves into Scorpio, it does make a quincunx with Neptune, 135 degree aspect to Neptune. That happens sort of Monday, Tuesday, and this aspect could be confusing. I mean, Mercury is the way we think, and if it's quincunx Neptune, there may be a lot of information that we don't fully understand. We might reach the wrong conclusions, and perhaps it's just the fact that we're getting used to Mercury moving through into a water sign, and there might be a sort of a blast of emotionality which could be undermining our perceptions. I mean, at least it could to begin with, and we just have to get used to it. We have to get used to this sort of new reality, and also deal with the fact that Neptune is 0 degrees 25 Aries. It's getting very close to the Aries point, and so things aren't as clear as we would like them to be. And then we have a full moon. So the moon starts the week right at the end of Pisces. It moves into Aries, and so moon in Aries, opposition with Sun in Libra. So this full moon, I will be talking about it in great detail when the time arrives, but this full moon, as always, it's about seeing things for what they are, having some clarity. I think a lot of us need some clarity, and maybe with the moon in Aries opposition the Sun in Libra, we have been just trying to work it out. We've been responding to it. We've been perhaps in an endless stage of balance, having to constantly rebalance, and then moon in Aries, we have to perhaps take a stand, and that may be what this full moon is about. But as I've said, I will be discussing this full moon in greater detail when the time arrives in a day or two's time. And then on Wednesday, we have got Venus making a sextile to Jupiter. So, Venus is now moving into the last decanate of Virgo, and it makes a sextile to Jupiter. And Venus sextile Jupiter it's a good aspect. It's a sextile. Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics, and so this sort of represents, sort of perhaps a midweek good fortune. Could be that there is something to be optimistic about, but there are 2 aspects coming up towards the end of a week. Thursday, Friday, you've got the Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, then you've got Mars quadrate Saturn. And, those two aspects could be rather destabilizing. Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, well, this aspect happens twice a year. It's not unusual, but it can be a time, when we're feeling somewhat nervous. We're not quite sure how things are going to work out, and things can just happen with Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus. We try our hardest, but there are things we just haven't allowed for, and they do happen, and then what? And one thing I have missed, which I should have mentioned, is the fact that Pluto is going stationary direct, and this actually happened on Tuesday. So we have got Pluto going stationary direct is, that's pretty major. And, I think that it is a reminder of the fact that Pluto is indeed in Aquarius. Of course, it's obvious that Pluto is in Aquarius, but perhaps when Pluto goes stationary direct, it really emphasizes the change that Pluto in Aquarius has been bringing. I think that over the last couple of weeks, we have seen evidence of Pluto in Aquarius. For example, in the UK, we've had the government wanting to bring in digital ID cards. I think that the reaction against digital ID cards has been so dramatic that one wonders whether it's really going to happen. And then we had George Galloway, the British politician, stopped at Gatwick because the authorities perhaps saw it as a good opportunity to confiscate his phones and his laptop, as he saw it as a phishing operation. And so we're seeing maybe evidence of a totalitarian state. I'm not just talking about the UK. You can see totalitarianism all around you, but in places where you wouldn't expect totalitarianism to be. Certainly in Western Europe, if you are a Democrat, you probably regard Trump as being fairly totalitarian. I'm not saying he is totalitarian, by the way. I'm just looking at it from a perspective of his opponents. And then, as the week progresses, you've got Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. So Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn just following right on Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus. So Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, that could certainly be a difficult aspect. It could be very frustrating, especially as Venus is also making an opposition to Saturn. So Saturn really comes into play with those two aspects. So, by the end of a week, there could be frustrations, and with Venus opposition Saturn, it's not the most sort of warm, cuddly, and friendly aspect. Venus opposition Saturn, it might feel that things are a little bit cold, that there may not be, much in the way of emotional warmth with Venus opposition Saturn. But, Venus moves quickly. Venus won't be opposition Saturn, forever. But I'm just suggesting maybe the week will end on quite a somber note. So there's a lot to talk about, and I will be talking about it, over the next week when I do my daily horoscopes. So let me now turn to the I Ching. So remember, this I Ching reading is for the week, and you don't have to watch it. This reading only applies to those who are watching the I Ching section of this video. So if you're not watching that section, you don't have to worry about it. And if you don't want your I Ching read, you can just stop watching the video now. And this I Ching reading will have 4 sections. I'll start with a general section, then money, and then career and business, and finally relationships. So I ask the question, what is the week starting on Monday, October the 6th going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 7, the army. And, this is quite a dramatic sounding hexagram. Remember, I'm talking about the week from a general perspective to begin with. And the army could literally mean the army, whatever you're doing. You may notice the army, certainly in the US, there are a lot of military bases. I can often hear sort of artillery in the distance, and that is a way of looking at it. So if the army is an issue for you, or I suppose it depends where you are. For example, there's talk of America, attacking the United States attacking Venezuela. So if you're in Venezuela, maybe the army is going to be of particular importance. But I don't know. I haven't really looked at the issue of Venezuela, so I'm not saying that America is going to do anything. But we do know that America has recently had a penchant for sort of attacking boats in Venezuela, which it claims are carrying drugs. But the army, in a more sort of personal way, represents what we are part of. Us as the soldier, even if we're not in the army, we're part of a group. We are part of a hierarchy. There are people above us, and perhaps there are people below us, and everyone should know their role. And perhaps we're thinking about collective action and what we need to do in order to achieve our goals. Now, what if we are on our own? What if there's no one around? Well, I think the army can still say something about what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish. We can be a one-person army. That is absolutely possible. Now, this hexagram has two moving lines. The bottom line moves. And with the bottom line moving, we have to make it absolutely clear to ourselves that things have to be in good order. So if we're going to be starting an operation this week, a military campaign, if you like, whatever that campaign is, everything has to be properly organized. We have to be very clear about what we're trying to achieve, how we're going to do it, and we can't leave anything for chance, because if we do leave things to chance, things could go wrong. Even then, even if we get our preparations perfectly right, that doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to turn the way we expect, because the fourth line moves, and the fourth line is about retreat. It's about dealing with an enemy who is stronger than us. And so if we are involved in some kind of campaign, something we're trying to do, particularly if it's of a competitive nature, we may find at some stage during a week that things don't work. Or rather, we're dealing with something which, at least in the short term, is too much to deal with. And some kind of retreat is important. And even if it's not a retreat, we should refrain from battle. So if you're thinking about a kind of conflict situation, you against someone else, then perhaps this is not the right time to actually be in conflict. It depends on the situation. Sometimes conflict is essential, but all things being equal, we should hold back. Just consider the possibility that the enemy, the rival, our competition, the other person is in a stronger position than us, and then we do need to act accordingly. Now, this hexagram, the army does move, because we have two moving lines, and it moves to hexagram number 54. So it is kind of a similar message. I talked about retreat, not being in a hurry, and we have here 54, the marrying maiden. And the symbol of the marrying maiden, she is a young woman who is in a hurry to get married. She's in a hurry for things to happen. And this might be us. For one reason or another, we are in a hurry. We want a resolution. And with the marrying maiden, the advice is, don't be in a hurry. If you're in a hurry, things could go wrong. It is also not appropriate. It's, almost indecent to be in a hurry. And so the marrying maiden is saying that, if we do want to be successful, we have to take it very slowly. There are steps we have to take. And, we just looked at the previous hexagram and we said, we were aware that the enemy is stronger than us. So if the enemy is stronger than us, we need to retreat, and we need to continue retreating. We need to accept the situation, work over it. I know it's, it's always, easy to think, well, okay, we've had a temporary setback, but let's go straight into the battle. It's not like that. I think, as the week continues, last half of a week, just start to, accept the situation. It doesn't mean you have to give up on anything, particularly if you've got the preparations right. The first moving line, well, we had the what did we have? We had the bottom line moving of the army. That was about making sure preparations were right. So if our preparations were right, we would have allowed for the possibility of retreat or failure, or we would have had a standby plan. And so when we realize that things aren't going to plan, we have that standby plan, and we don't just rush forward like the marrying maiden wants to do, give it another go. That's not the right approach, because if we are in too much of a hurry, we think we can go straight back into the battle. Well, it's really not going to work. Turning to money, and if money is important to you, as it might be, it's important to all of us at some level, it does seem that maybe some action is required, or rather you think that action is required. You're perhaps looking at your finances, or you're looking at some particular financial issue that is coming to the fore, and you're thinking, this isn't great, things could be better, and the question is, what do you do about it? And you have to kind of take a long-term view. So you start with a plan. The bottom line moves, and so because the bottom line moves, you've got to make sure everything is properly prepared. You're thinking about what are you trying to achieve, and this is especially the case if you've got a financial issue regarding another person. Perhaps you're trying to get the better of another person, or you're trying to fight back, or you feel you're hard done by, and you're trying to work out the best approach for sorting out your finances or getting the money you feel you deserve. So you get the preparations in order, but you've got to think long term, because I don't think anything is going to be achieved, like in the shorter term, like this week, because we know that the first line moving is about preparation, and then the fourth line moves, and the fourth line is about realizing that the situation is too much for us. We've taken on too much. Maybe we've been over ambitious. Maybe if we're dealing with another person, perhaps someone else owes us money, or perhaps there's someone we want to talk to. Perhaps they can help us financially. It may not be a person, it could be an organization. But when we look at the way the forces are lined up, the correlation of forces, maybe when we look at it, we realize that it's not good. But we are not in a good position, and that if we were to really go for it and make demands, it wouldn't work, and we can see it beforehand. And so if you've got any sort of financial struggle, fight, argument on the horizon, probably not this week, maybe next week, but not this week. This week you need to hold back, because you're simply not in a strong enough position. And this moves to the marrying maiden, and the marrying maiden represents someone who is in a hurry, someone who wants money. Let's sort it out now. Give me the cash. That might be the marrying maiden. Now, who is the marrying maiden? It could represent us being in a hurry, wanting money. It could be someone else. So we might find that there's someone who is being really pushy. They want to be rewarded. They want the cash up front. And if you come across this kind of situation, perhaps you're ordering a service or you're buying something and you see the marrying maiden, and it doesn't have to be a she. It can be a he. It might even just be an organization really pushing you to come up with the money. And so if you find yourself being pressurized, then don't pay them unless you really have to, because someone is looking for your commitment. But it could be you. It could be you in a hurry for a reward, for someone else to pay up front. But such behavior would not be appropriate. It would look bad, and it would sort of undermine your reputation. But you have to consider, which way is it? Is it you pressurizing someone, or is it someone else pressurizing you? And so I think you have to watch for the marrying maiden. But on the plus side, if you take things slowly, so if you're looking for something of a financial or material nature, then you have to do it slowly, step by step. It's like the marrying maiden can slowly move towards marriage, but it has to be done in a reasonable, perhaps slightly drawn out way, and that is the right way to do it. And then there is career and business, and it might all seem to be a bit of a battle, because we've got the army as the first hexagram, and the army, it's a very collective hexagram. So if you are in a job, you might be very aware of the people you are working with. And I think that this hexagram would be most appropriate if you were working in a team, working in a group, working with people towards some sort of collective end. And you're very aware of who your superiors are, and perhaps who you have authority over. So perhaps if you work for an organization, you're going to be very aware of your role in the hierarchy, where you stand. If you're self-employed or you have your own business, well, when it's just you, perhaps people working for you. I don't know, it depends on the situation. But there are still perhaps people you need to deal with, and you're aware of all of that. And it does seem that there's something that you're trying to achieve over the course of a week. And of course, it's important that you have a clear set of goals. You really know what it is that you're trying to achieve, because if you're vague, it's not just you being vague. If other people are being vague, no one knows what the army is for. If you're in an army, you're fighting a battle, you're fighting a war. You've got a set of victory conditions, presumably, and you might find, or other people might find, at a certain point, that you're trying to accomplish something that simply can't be accomplished. It's just too much right now. And that relates to the fourth line from the bottom moving, and that is about retreat. And certainly not going into a sort of conflict. It's not about really struggling to get something done, to make something happening. So if there is any type of goal this week, something you're working towards, or not just you working towards, but your workmates, perhaps your company that you might be working for, something you're being told to do by your employer, whatever it is, if there is anything that you're working towards, then you might have to think again and accept that short term the situation is just not good enough, but still there's pressure. Even if you feel you have to retreat and not confront the enemy, still there's pressure. And that is perhaps reflected by the hexagram this moves to, which is the marrying maiden. The marrying maiden, just let's keep going. Let's get it done. Perhaps let's get it done by the end of a week. The marrying maiden, she's in a hurry. And there is this warning, don't be in a hurry. It doesn't look good. And you might have to be thinking about next week or some other time in the future. You have to do it slowly. And perhaps that's the real message of the marrying maiden. If there's something you want, or something your company wants, or something that your employers want, then take it slowly. and you're not going to accomplish everything this week. And if you try to accomplish everything this week, then there's a good chance that it's going to go wrong. And finally, there is relationships, and we start off with the army. And if relationships are important to you, well, the army, it's not really about relationships. It's about collective relationships. It's not really about one-to-one relationships, though perhaps you might want to see it in terms of you getting yourself together, trying to organize yourself and thinking about the kind of relationships you want this week. And can you see relationships getting on with people, not breaking up with people, whatever it is, as a military operation? And it could be that there is someone that you are trying to ingratiate yourself with, in which case, you've got to be properly prepared. But it might reach a point this week, with the fourth line moving, where you feel that it's not right, that there is a feeling of retreat. And so we have retreat here, wanting to retreat from other people, or perhaps someone else, getting close to someone and then backing off. But the thing is, the army, it moves to the marrying maiden. And the marrying maiden is a very relationship-orientated hexagram. It's talking about someone being in a hurry. The marrying maiden, she wants to get married. Now, okay, that's not literally how it need be. I mean, it can have many dimensions. And don't forget, relationships can be about all sorts of things. They can be about business relationships. They can be about someone trying to get you to agree to buy something. It could be about someone in a hurry to form a partnership. One thinks of marrying maiden. I mean, I'll give you an example. I'm afraid I can't remember her name, but there was in British politics there was this man called Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, he was leader of the Labour Party, but he's now an independent member of Parliament. And there was this woman. I think she'd lost the whip. She had, the parliamentary whip, and she wanted to sort of form a new party, and with Jeremy Corbyn. And she made all the announcements, and she was in a hurry to make these announcements, and she kind of jumped the gun. And so that's an example of marrying maiden. So it needn't be a romantic relationship. It can be a political relationship. Just one party being in a hurry for whatever reason, and it's a hurry that doesn't serve anyone's best purposes. So you mustn't be in a hurry. You might feel that you want to get close to someone for whatever reason, but if you're in too much of a hurry, it's not going to work. So if you're trying to form any kind of relationship, it has to be done slowly. But it can work both ways. It can be about someone else being in a hurry, someone else wanting to form a relationship with you, wanting to get your attention, wanting you to sign on a dotted line. And this is not advisable. So that's it. That's my preview of the week. I hope you found it useful. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.